Welcome to Regis World Literature. This is lesson 29, and we are finished with our unit on French literature. And so now we are going to take the last few weeks and talk a little about some writing skills. And we're going to focus on writing good or powerful paragraphs. Okay? Now I'm going to take the main content of this section for our last 5 weeks on writing strong paragraphs from a book by Bruce Ross-Larson, the founder of the American Writing Institute, and this little booklet of one of 3 or 4 on effective writing series. The effective writing series is called Powerful Paragraphs. The others in this series are Editing Yourself, Riveting Reports, and Stunning Sentences. So I thought we would start here with the focus on writing strong paragraphs. I think that this series will be very practical and very helpful to you as you continue to develop and take your writing forward. Okay, so let us begin. I'm going to be reading essentially from the first paragraph or from the first chapter and writing some notes here. Many writers think of paragraphs as a collection of sentences framed by an indent and a carriage return, running perhaps 10 or 12 lines. Few have the language to describe what's good or bad about a paragraph. This book shows you what it means for a paragraph to be unified, coherent, and well-developed. The idea here is to give you a way of looking at paragraphs that will change the way you write. So paragraphs are a key component for any further development of writing. Obviously, paragraphs are made up of sentences, but just a concatenation or a bunch of sentences written together do not make a paragraph. There are 3 things we're looking for in a paragraph. This is Mrs. Kinzer, of course. I'm talking to you, the listener here. They want to be unified. A paragraph wants to be unified. It wants to be coherent and well-developed. Let me continue on. A paragraph is unified if each sentence is clearly related to the point. Coherent if you make it obvious to your reader how each sentence is linked to the point. You can make the link more obvious by repeating key words and phrases. You can also use transitional words and phrases to enumerate and coordinate a paragraph's sentences. And you can change the structure of your sentences to reveal parallel or subordinate ideas. These techniques do more than make your paragraphs coherent. They also give them pace. Let me continue on and then we'll talk about it a little bit. A paragraph is well developed if its sentences unfold in a way that makes your argument perfectly clear to the reader. One of the best ways to do this is to express the point of the paragraph as a general statement in the first sentence and then to support it with details and examples in subsequent sentences. Used for perhaps half to 2/3 of all paragraphs in expository writing, this model is among the most common. Some of the other ways are to conclude with a point, to phrase the point as a question and answer, and to undermine an argument to make the opposite point. Still other ways include making a subtle or not so subtle comment at the end of a straightforward series of details. Deciding how to develop a paragraph generally depends on the details, the examples, and comments you have to support your point. Okay, so that's the author's writing. Now, let me tell you what this means. We generally say this: start with a topic sentence. In other words, what is the topic of this paragraph? And unification of a paragraph, or whether or not a paragraph is unified, depends on the fact that every idea in that paragraph must speak to that topic. Okay, so then the coherence is provided by your subpoints. What are the points I'm making about this topic? And I want to be able to, a well-developed paragraph allows me to identify those points and how they relate to one another clearly. The more clearly you can develop your paragraph, the easier it is for the reader to understand how your subpoints were derived and how they relate to the topic and to one another. Okay, and taking time to plot out, the more planning you do before you write, the easier it is to write. Writing becomes easy, and you don't have what is one of the biggest problems with student writers. You don't have rambling. Okay, if I understand what are my 3 points, why they relate to one another, or why I've identified them, and chosen to put them in a certain order. They might not follow from one another directly. That's why I'm adding a little bit of ideas here. Okay, they're not necessarily one immediately results from the other. Maybe I'm just talking about different ideas. In other words, let's say I'm talking about Cyrano de Bergerac, and I'm talking about one of his character qualities would be a topic. It would be his courage. Then my subpoints would be how I know he's courageous, or maybe he's courageous in different areas. He might be courageous as a warrior or as a soldier. He might be courageous in his fearlessness to be one against the crowd, but the most important courage he illustrates is his courage of character to be willing to risk all and possibly lose all. That would be maybe my 3 points. Okay, I have related them to one another. I've decided which one I think is of greatest value and told. Now, what else is missing here in the paragraph? So a paragraph consists of a topic, subpoints. I would like at least 2, probably 3, and subpoint 1. And then what do I need below a subpoint to write a good high school paragraph? I need a support. I need in other words, why do I think he's courageous in battle? I need to have some validation for that statement. And so that would be a quote from the text or an example from the text of an event or something he's doing, example of action, or a description of character. Okay. He shows me that, because of all the cadets, he is the one that Roxanne could be most offended by not being allowed to go into battle, or disappointed. Okay, so you could have description of character, an example of action, a response to another individual. All these things would be ways to support my idea is that he is a courageous soldier. But I must at least support, at least one of these must include a quote about this point. The subpoint, okay. Well, I take that back here. Okay, if I'm just talking about a paragraph, I have my topic. Okay, I've kind of... okay, my topic is courage. There we go. Here's he's courageous. There's my paragraph. My subpoint is he's courageous as a soldier. I should have, sometimes I tell you, you only need 1 quote per topic. Okay, so we'll stay with that. There's my topic or my paragraph. So I don't need to include this quote for each subpoint. Let me change that. Okay, what I've said here now is for each subpoint, you're going to want 2 or 3 subpoints. For each subpoint, you're going to need to provide some support. The support could be things like, these are examples of support: a quote, an example of action, a description of character, a response to somebody else in the play, right? All of these things would provide support for my argument that he's a courageous soldier. At one point in the paragraph, you need to include a quote. It doesn't have to be for this point. It could be for subpoint 2. So what did I say subpoint 2 would be? Not only is he courageous as a soldier, but he's courageous in his willingness to stand one against all. So to stand against the crowd. This could be in an example of when he goes out to fight the soldiers at night. Okay, if I use that as a courageous soldier example, I would not want to repeat it here. It could be in his willingness to go into the theater and stand against Montfleury, though everybody else is popular or wants to listen to him, whether they think he's the best actor or not. They still want to listen to him. And he's closing down the theater, and he's getting a lot of hisses and boos, and a lot of people think, really, the arrogance of the man. He's willing to stand against the crowd in that, right? So you think of one support, at least one supporting point. Why do I say that he's willing to be one against all? Okay, again, that can be talking about his character. He's always a loner. He's always been a loner. He has to stand against the crowd. You can support it in many different ways. That's the point. And then your subpoint 3, I could provide my support for my third point. He's willing to risk all. Okay, I could provide that by showing that he's willing to proclaim in the night as he talks to Roxanne on the balcony and say everything that really is in his heart. Christian, get out of the way. Let me really express this. Even though he's still hiding under the shadows, both physically and metaphorically or symbolically, because he's not willing to confess who he is. He's willing to risk all when he finally decides he's getting ready to tell Roxanne that it was him all along with the letters. Or he's willing to risk all or die to all for the sake of what he thinks is right when he says, "This secret is buried with me forever." He's willing to risk all. So there's several examples, right? We see his character. He's willing not to take a patron. There's so many things you could go. All you have to do is pick one, and then one support. Okay, and then you need to go ahead and provide a quote. Where do I think my best quote could be put? What quote do you like? Would you place it about here, the courageous soldier, about here, one against all, or here, his willingness to risk? When he first went to Roxanne at Ragueneau's shop, and he swallows, actually that's a different kind of courage. See, I could have placed another point here. What other things could I have talked about when I'm talking about Cyrano being courageous? Could you imagine? To be unpopular in what he speaks, not to please those in authority or power. That's another form of courage. She says, "Oh, you're such a hero," to Roxanne says to him. "You're such a hero. You're so courageous. I need to hear more about it." And his response is, I have been more courageous since. Remember that? Oh, I have done more since. The courage to swallow what he wanted to say, to be willing to care for her and support what she's asking. Okay, so when he promises that he will actually befriend and protect Christian. So there's so many directions you could go, but this is the idea of a unified. The unified part is that everything in this paragraph will be about Cyrano's courage. Okay. The second idea, coherence, means that I understand I'm going to have several points in this case. Courage as a soldier. How's he courageous? As a soldier, being alone. He doesn't need others to be with him to be courageous, and his willingness to risk. Okay. So that's coherence. I understand my points. I will develop them in a logical fashion, and I will tell you what I think about them. And for me, I'm developing in this order, not in some other, because I think of all of them, maybe that's the one I consider most valuable. Or I could have made other points, okay? But that's coherence. And then well-developed is one, I make it very clear to the reader how I'm developing my subpoints, but also I would add the idea supported. There is not a statement over here you can make. You can't tell me he's a courageous soldier without supporting it. You can't tell me he is courageous and willing to be alone against the world if you don't support it from the text. You can't tell me that he's willing to risk everything if you don't support it with a quote, with an example, etc. I'm kind of beating the dead horse in a way, but this is so important. This is the heart of good writing, right there. Okay, and the more you get confident in this, the more you will be able to find your voice. It's not first find my voice and find my style. It's first develop your content, then you will be comfortable to move into your style. Okay, and everybody's style is a little different. And the style will make you effective in moving the heart and mind of another, but only if you've mastered the elements of the paragraph. Now, the next idea here, I was going to say one more thing, but I've forgotten it. Wait one second. I guess all I wanted to say is make sure you include one quote. Okay, now I've talked about this over the year, but I want you to understand these three words here and how they work to develop a strong paragraph or a powerful paragraph. Now, he says, building paragraphs from a plan. This is essentially what I've been starting to illustrate for you. Strong paragraphs will emerge more easily if you have done some planning. A paragraph by paragraph plan helps you organize your material by going beyond an outline to identify the topic of each paragraph in an entire piece. You then write the topic of each paragraph at the top of a sheet of paper and try to make a strong point about each topic. Finally, you assemble your raw material, your details, your comments, your examples under those points. With your material thus organized and your head significantly clearer, you're ready to write a unified, coherent, and well-developed paragraphs. All right, so I'm going to just say plan. Plan, okay, your points. Okay. Now, getting off to a good start. So we're going to talk about opening paragraphs and concluding paragraphs. Opening paragraphs have tremendous effect on how and whether your piece will be read. The most common opening is the throat-clearing paragraph that blandly announces how the piece will unfold. What you want instead is to grab your reader's attention, rivet them to your message, and propel them through your argument. Here are a few ways to do just that. 1, put your main message up front. And I would suggest that this is probably the easiest for the student to develop, but you can practice with others, especially if you enjoy the process of writing. So put your main message up front. Tell your readers exactly what you intend to get across to them by setting out your main and any supporting messages up front where they can't be missed. So what's my main point? Courage. He's courageous. So you state it right out front. The first, opening paragraph. Now, I've actually talked about courage as only one of several qualities. That was the beginning or the topic of paragraph 1 in the essay on Cyrano's character. So you might say something about Cyrano is one of the most unique characters, or he is one of the most admired characters in all of literature, or he is a conundrum because we often feel the pain of his personal character flaws, and yet he remains one of the most admired characters in literature. So we would state our main message up front with the subpoints. He's admired because he's courageous, because he's honest, whatever you want to say. You might not think he's honest, okay? In the sense that he has a strong sense of, or maybe I'd put that as my third one, he has a strong sense of self, or he is uncompromising. Maybe that's what I mean by honesty. Maybe I would want to do it this way as I'm thinking aloud here. I would want to say he has a strong sense of self, and he is uncompromising to it. Whatever I would want to do. Now, we've talked about this, but we're talking about in your opening paragraph, you put your main message up front and with your subpoints. That is the most common way, especially to write expository paragraph. But let me give you some other ideas. You could start with a gripping fact. This might be easier to do with a history paper or a science paper or some other topic, but here would be an example. Every 20 minutes or so, someone somewhere is killed or injured by a landmine. According to the United Nations, more than 110 million buried mines are left over from the 20th century's numerous wars, most of them in poor countries such as Afghanistan, Angola, and Cambodia, which can ill afford the cost of removing them. A gripping fact at the beginning of a paper in the first paragraph. And then we go on and develop what we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about the whole paper might be about landmines, or it might not be. It might be about the physical waste left over from warfare. Or it might be an idea about the calamity of what is left behind after a war in the nations that maybe had nothing to do with the war. Okay, so there are a lot of different things this paper could be about, but I could start with a gripping fact. A third way I could introduce my introductory paragraph is with asking questions. This could work well for history, science, or literature. Here's an example: swamped by voicemail or email. Prepare yourself for the next wave of digital communications deluge, instant messaging. Okay, you can imagine how you could ask different questions. Okay. What does it really mean to be courageous? What does it really mean to love someone? We think what? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so asking a question would be very appropriate for any of my essays in literature as well as others. Set the scene. Out here in Big Sky Country, here's an example. High on a ridge of the Absaroka Range, a golden eagle soars, pushed upward by a stream of warm air. From its perch in a golden-leafed aspen, a Steller's jay, the color of indigo, shrieks at the interlopers 20 feet below. A Clark's nutcracker drills into a pine cone, the only sound except the distant rumble from the Yellowstone River. Now, to be quite honest, from this introduction, I'm definitely setting the scene, but I don't quite know exactly what the topic of this whole paper would be. It could be a few things. It could be Big Sky Country, it could be about birds. I'm not even quite sure, but I'm definitely painting a picture before I begin. I could do that, painting a picture of a typical romance. What does a young person look? How does a young person know they're in love? You know, I'm not asking. I'm asking the question, but I could paint a scene instead, a typical scene of first love, and say this is any. Edmond Rostand surprises us all by painting one of the most beautiful and unique developments of love throughout all of literature, something like that. Okay, so you start with setting the scene. Number 4, surprise your readers. His example here, humor can put your readers at ease. A tactic especially useful before launching into a controversial topic. A bagpipe's appeal is difficult to explain. Playing it can be lonely calling. It can be a lonely calling. At a party, nobody asks you to sit down and bang out a song. You wear a skirt. There are the jokes. Okay, so what have we got? We've got our readers' attention by humor, and then we develop what we're going to talk about. Maybe the history of bagpipe playing, maybe the nobility of it, maybe its use in warfare, maybe its real appeal, whatever he would want to say, but there's the introduction. A couple more. Number 6, present a brief history. We can start with a historical anecdote or an interesting an analogy. Okay, and he gives us an example, but I'm thinking, okay, could I do that in literature? Certainly. Edmond Rostand went to instantaneous success as a young author with the publication of this play, and so you could give specifics about that and how it took really France by storm, and it was incredibly popular and has continued to be so. So that could be an introductory paragraph. Number 7. Address your reader. Speak to the reader directly. I would caution this a little bit with expository writing. It's usually better for a speech, but you just have to be careful that you must get to the point before you're done. Sometimes students who enjoy this approach like to keep the hand close to themselves and don't want to play out their hand by the end of the opening paragraph, and you need to in expository writing. So that would be my only caution there. But here he gives an example. Imagine it is late 1986, and you are managing a consumer electronics factory in Japan. Your business is in trouble. The deal struck at the Plaza Hotel in the year before has doubled the value of the yen, and it goes on and on. What would you do? So you're putting the reader in the driver's seat, so to speak, as somebody you're addressing them particularly. Now that is a fine what I would call pre-paragraph opening. So you could add an extra paragraph before what we typically call the introductory paragraph. And you might have fun experimenting with that. Because I could say, imagine your best friend, wrote all these letters, whatever. Imagine something. What would you do? And then you go into the traditional introductory paragraph. Cyrano, the great hero of Edmond Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac. So you'd always want to make sure. So this would be before your paragraph, your typical introductory paragraph, where you would have what? Background. Make sure you mention the name of the author and the work. A background statement or two describing what's going to background to lead you in to the topic, to lead you in to the 3 main points. Okay. So the only problem with this address your reader idea, or even some of these others, asking questions would just be a typical sentence or two. Setting the scene would also be one of these. Probably, if you're going to go into several sentences, probably going to be a pre-opening paragraph, pre-paragraph opening, okay? And then you'll follow with your typical introductory paragraph. Okay, and then opening with a quotation. That's also a very effective way to open. Okay, so what have I told you here in this topic on powerful paragraphs or writing paragraphs? We have 3 characteristics we're seeking to have in every paragraph, whether it's a body paragraph, an introductory paragraph, or a concluding paragraph. But most specifically, I would focus my first remarks on unity and coherence and well-developed or good development, strong development, on my body paragraphs. Now I'm talking about my opening paragraphs. Almost always you'll just do it main message up front, containing these kinds of details over here. But here are some other options to start a paragraph. And especially if you get bored with the opening paragraph, these are some things I would commend you to start exploring. Okay, think about this. Think about it as you are writing your papers. And even if you were to write, you might practice. Why don't you write yourself a paragraph on Libret's character? Okay, I'm not going to collect this because I've already told you everything we're going to have now. But you could write a paragraph on Libret just for practice and his character, and just one paragraph going back, trying to make it unified, cohesive, and well-developed. Try to practice these skills.